Chapter 5. Finding a Name. Holding a large feast in the great hall after a battle was a noble tradition. Preparations for the feast had begun before the army had even left that morning. The feast was a celebration of victory over the forces of evil. It was held in recognition of the bravery of the soldiers who had fought. It was to honour those who had made it back alive and to remember those who had fallen. Unfortunately, the army was far too large for there to be room for everyone in the great hall. The guests were limited to the noble family itself, and the Duke's small contingent of knights, about 100 strong, and their families. Manglos, the Duke's major advisor, was also on the guest list, despite the fact that he came from peasant stock. No feast was complete without Manglos taking a turn on the floor and showing off some of his more entertaining illusions. Jenny had been forced to change her clothing again for the feast. "You should wear something more befitting a lady," the Duchess had insisted. The dress Jenny was wearing was beautiful. It really brought out some of Jenny's better features. Jenny hated it. Like all dresses that were made for her, she felt it was far too restrictive. The Duke and Duchess sat at the very centre point of the table, the main focus of the celebration. The Duke's son sat next to the Duke, with Greyforth, the eldest, gaining pride of placing the seat next to his father. Jenny sat on the other half of the table, next to her mother. Jenny tried to enjoy the celebration. It wasn't easy. Her mind kept wandering to the small study in another part of the castle, and the little baby harpy that she had left there. She worried greatly about the fate of the baby. She feared that a servant might happen upon the child by accident, and then all hell would break loose. Jenny played with her food. She kept glancing at the great pendulum clock on the wall opposite the main table, and tried to will its hands to move a little faster, and for the feast to come to an end. The feast wasn't likely to end any time soon. Normally, celebrations such as this would creep on well into the night. Sometimes, such a feast wouldn't end until dawn of the next day. Jenny could tell that Duke was having a good time. There wasn't much chance he was going to call an end to the feast early. "Father," Jenny whispered insistently. They had been at the feast for a couple of hours before she said anything. The Duke looked towards Jenny, having to lean forward so as not to disturb his wife too much. "Yes, sweetie?" Jenny didn't say anything. She didn't want to attract her mother's attention. Instead, she made a few head-bobbing movements towards the main doors of the great hall. "What is it, sweetie?" the Duke persisted. Jenny quickly mimed herself holding a baby. The Duke nodded. If Breadim had noticed anything, she made no show of it, though she did give her husband a quizzical look as he pushed his chair back and rose from the table. "Husband?" the Duchess inquired. "We have business to conduct," the Duke replied. "Business?" Breadim said, sounding a little confused. "Now?" "Now," the Duke insisted. "You should come along as well, my love. There is something we are all going to have to decide." This was it, Jenny thought to herself. Now we decide on the fate of a baby. She got up to follow. Her two brothers, obviously thinking along the same lines, did likewise. With the Duke and his family getting up to leave in the middle of the celebration, the room suddenly became deathly silent. The Duke, feeling he ought to say something, turned to face the gathered multitude. "I regret that we must take our leave of you for a short while. There is a small detail of today's battle that my family and I have yet to sort out. Please, feel free to stay and have a great time. I expect we will be back shortly." There was a soft answering babble about the room. No one seemed all that certain of what was happening. Then someone evidently made a funny comment that caused another to laugh. A moment later, the feast was back in full swing. "Do you need my help with anything?" Manglos asked as they passed his table. "Thank you, Manglos," the Duke replied. "I don't think we need your help with this one." Manglos had a knowing gleam in his eye. After all, he had seen Jenny holding the baby and had been party to most of the discussion concerning the child before they had started to head for home. "I understand. Call me if you need me." The Duke led his family out of the great hall and along the corridors of the residency towards his study. Jenny wanted to press on ahead. She wanted to lead the way and get there quickly, but she knew that she wasn't supposed to know anything about the child waiting for them in the Duke's study, and so she did her best to control herself and bring up the rear of the group. The little baby harpy was still in the study. He was lying on his back on the Duke's desk where Jenny had left him earlier. As well as feeding him, Jenny had gotten him a small cushion to rest his head on from the Duke's guest chair. The baby wiggled on the desk a little as the Duke and his family entered the study, but he didn't seem to have any fear of them. Jenny hurried to the baby's side. She picked him up and snuggled him to her. She sounded surprised as she said, "Oh, baby, you're all wet." There was a wet patch on the Duke's desk where the baby had been lying. The Duke eyed it with more than a little disdain. Then he said, "The child has been left in here since this morning. We should probably be glad that that is all he's done." "What is that?" the Duchess exclaimed. This was the first time she had seen the child. No one had even mentioned his existence to her. "Can't you tell?" Jenny replied. "It's a baby harpy." She rocked the baby gently in her arms, despite the fact that the baby was damp. "It's why we're here," Greyfulf said calmly. "It's a harpy, and it should be killed. It will grow up to be a threat to us and our people. However, my lovely sister over there thinks that far from killing it, we should adopt it." "Really?" The Duchess turned to Jenny. "How long have you known about this child?" Tia interjected quickly. "I told her about it. I told her just after we returned home." He glanced across the room at his father for moral support. Clearly, Tia didn't like to lie to his mother. Jenny looked pleadingly at her mother. "Horse and tiger, do you really think we could adopt him?" "I don't think adoption is an option." This came from the Duke. "If you weren't planning to adopt it," the Duchess spoke up, "then why did you bring it home with you?" Then she looked at the child. "You know, they do look cute at that age." "Yes, babies are cute," Greyfulf said tersely, "but then it grows up, and it kills. We should kill it now before it has a chance." "I'm still waiting to hear why you brought it home," the Duchess said. "Now Jenny seems to be attached to it. If you had dealt with him at the Harpy village, instead of bringing him home, then Jenny needn't even be aware of his existence." Tia started laughing. "Well played, Jenny." "Did I miss something?" the Duchess asked. No, Tia replied. "Something just struck me as amusing. So, I take it we are no longer planning to kill this baby, and are going to adopt him instead? Just think, a harpy living in a human family. A harpy being taught what it means to be human. Who knows, maybe we can rehabilitate the beast." "Don't you dare hurt him," Jenny yelled. "Hurt him?" Tia sounded confused. "I'm not going to hurt him." "I heard you," Jenny cried. "You want to rehabilitate him." "Tia means he wants to teach the harpy to think like a human, dear," Breadim cut in. "What about the king?" Greyfulf put forward. "The second the king discovers what we're doing, he'll be up in arms. We'll be lucky if father isn't immediately executed for treason." "Well, I'm not about to tell him," Jenny insisted. She didn't like the idea of putting her father at risk, nor could she bring herself to turn her back on the child. She continued to swing back and forth a little, rocking the baby gently in her arms. "Look at him, Jenny," Greyfulf told her. "He's a harpy. I think it might be noticeable that he's not human." "He's right," the Duke agreed sadly. "And although I doubt the king would go so far as to execute me, I really can't afford to get on his wrong side." "So, can I kill him now?" Greyfulf requested. "No," Jenny blurted out. She turned her back on Greyfulf, shielding the baby with her own body. "It's okay, Jenny," Breadim said. "No one is going to hurt your child." "But Breadim, my dear," the Duchess said. "You can be very dim at times, my love," Breadim commented. "Here in the castle we have one of the greatest mages in the land. Only the king himself has more capable magicians. I suggest you take the baby to Mangloss tomorrow morning and get him to create some kind of trinket that will make our new child appear to be human, at least on the outside." Greyfulf looked doubtful as he said, "You do realise that half the army saw the child?" "I doubt it was that many," the Duke replied. "And besides, the average soldier doesn't normally get to speak with the king." Then he nodded. "Maybe Mangloss can do something." "Fine," Mangloss exclaimed unhappily. "I see father's mind has changed. Looks like I'm the only one left on the side of good sense." "I'm just trying to be even-handed," the Duke replied. "As head of the family, that's my job." "Sure. Even-handedly voting to stick your own head into the noose," Greyfulf grumbled. "I'm going back to the party." He strode out of the study, slamming the door behind him. "I hope he doesn't do anything silly, like telling anyone what we're doing," the Duke muttered. "Well, Pest," Tia commented, looking directly at Jenny with a genuinely friendly smile. "It looks like you won." Jenny was looking at the door to the study that Greyfulf had just passed through. "If I won, then why do I feel so guilty about it?" "Don't feel guilty, dear," the Duchess said, taking the young harpy from Jenny. I think you just saved your new brother's life. Brother? Jenny said, surprised. It hadn't occurred to her that adopting the child would make him her brother. You did want your father and me to adopt him, didn't you? The Duchess asked. Then, more as a comment to herself, she added, I'll need to find him some fresh clothing. If only someone had told me earlier that a child was in here, I would have made sure he was properly clothed and fed. And changed, the Duke muttered, eyeing the wet spot on his desk. Should I go and find Mangloss, father? Tyr asked. The Duke looked at Tyr and shook his head. I think it would be best if we leave that until morning, as your mother suggested. Let him enjoy the feast. What if Mangloss can't do anything? Jenny asked. Then I'm afraid we'll have to give the baby to Greyforth. I can't allow Harpy to run around the castle free. The king would soon hear about it, I'm sure, the Duke told her honestly. Jenny swallowed deeply and said, Then I want to come with you to see Mangloss tomorrow. Don't worry, Jenny, the Duchess assured her. I'm sure Mangloss will be able to do something for him. After all, he often aids the Barden's spies in a similar vein. Breadeem, the Duke warned. What? The Duchess retorted. Do you think we can't trust our own children? In the meantime, it'll give us a chance to think of a name for him, Tyr offered. Indeed, the Duchess said gaily. This cute little bundle of joy will need a name. We should get back to the feast before the others wonder what's happened to us, the Duke put in. Feel free to think of a name for him, but try not to get too attached with him until we know whether or not Mangloss can do anything for him. I think that warning might be a bit late for Jenny, the Duchess suggested. Actually, Tyr volunteered, I think Pest should be the one to select his name. After all, she seems to be the one that's really attached to him. You can always veto it if you want to call him something silly, or too girly. I'm good with that, the Duchess added. Jenny, you name him, but keep it sensible. Jenny considered that as a challenge. A few names she had been thinking of, she suddenly rejected as being too cutesy. She hadn't really expected to be called on to come up with his actual name, and so she hadn't tried to think of anything serious. I think I know what I want to call him, Jenny said. She was careful how she worded her next sentence. There was a soldier in the army that I got on quite well with. He didn't come back with the rest of the army today. I will miss him, and the chats we often had together. The thought of him made her eyes water. What was his name? The Duke asked. I only knew him by his surname. It was Solby, Jenny said calmly. I think I know the man you mean, the Duke commented. You do? The Duchess intoned surprise. Solby was one of my bodyguards, love. One of my best men. He died today, saving my life. Yes, I knew him, the Duke answered, playing along with his daughter. I think naming the baby after him would make a nice tribute. What was his name? His first name, the Duchess asked. I'm not calling the child Solby. Race, the Duke said. Race the Moth, Jenny said, trying it out for size. I think that will work. Good, the Duke commented. I hope we get the chance to use it. Anyway, now that we've named the child, can we return to the feast? You and Tyr go ahead, dear, the Duchess told him as she held little Race tightly to herself. Jenny and I have a baby to attend to.